James. There's a lot of background noise coming from somebody.
Sorry, Paladin, I didn't catch what you said.
Somebody's got a lot of background noise. I don't know who it is, but are you able to mute them? Are you able to see who it is?
I hear voices in the background. I might have detected something in Greek. Can you hear me? Is it Paula, I think, is on the one that says Shaktipad? I think Paula may have left her computer, but left the sound on. I'm not quite sure if I am able to.
You should be able to mute her, James, if you're the host.
Can I mute? Let me see if participants, Shaktipad. Oh, mute. Wow, I can. Wonderful. Done it. There we are.
The power you have to shut us up.
I mean, it's wonderful hearing the merry sound of voices in Greek in the background, but could be a potential slight clash with the Sanskrit. So after that diversion, let us now call up the. First of all, I will share, get the iPad going. Just bear with me while it happens. Okay, let me just check we're properly shared. So can you all now see a blank iPad screen? Okay, very good. I will also now call up the Buddhicharya Avatar text that we're looking at, which now should be in front of you. Good. So we're looking at chapter 6, verse 31. Just turn off my phone. Evam paravasham sarvam yadvasham supichavashaha nirmanavadacheshteshu bhaveshu kwakupyate. Basically, he's saying here that if people do things that annoy you, they're just acting under other forces over which, he says here, they have no control. So it's as pointless to get angry with that as it is to get angry with, as it were, puppets on a stage or images created by a magic show or by a conjuring trick. Just read it once more and then we'll analyze it. Evam paravasham sarvam yadvasham supichavashaha nirmanavadacheshteshu bhaveshu kwakupyate. The first line, Shantideva here is reciting. Sorry, I'm running here on number 32. He's saying in this way, evam, in this way, thus. Evam, by the way, meaning thus, can refer either to what has just been said or what is about to be said, and it's the evam that we see at the beginning of the many sutras. Evam maya shrutam in Sanskrit and evam me sutam in Pali. So in this way, thus or in that way, evam paravasham sarvam. It's used as a neuter singular here, in the sense of everything. Remember this sarvam, it can be used in the plural as well. You can have the plural sarvani, neuter plural servani, meaning all things, or you can use it as a singular sarvam. Just as in English we can say everything, or we can say all things with much the same meaning. Whereas everything tends to regard everything as one composite block, whereas all things a multiplicity of things, but a multiplicity including everything. So sarvam just means everything here. Paravasham sarvam. So sarvam, everything is paravasham. This verb rather, sorry, what am I talking about? Noun, vasha. The idea is power, but not a kind of internal power or strength, which is more like a shakti or a bala. This vasha is power over something else, extending one's will over something else. And para means, in this context, other. So if you are paravasha, literally other power, means under the power of another person or another thing. If something is controlling you, then you are paravasha. I'm not sure if I did a note on it, but oops, I got the wrong here. This vasha, it's curiously enough, it's an Indo-European root wek, which is cognate directly with our English word wish. So if somebody else is, and it came to have a slightly different meaning in English, what you wish for, but in Sanskrit, it has the meaning that your wish, your will controls another. Somebody else is subjugated to your will. And it's under the meaning, that kind of meaning that came into English as wish, but with a much more attenuated meaning in modern English, German wünschen and English word wish. So it's the idea of subjecting somebody else to your wish, to your will. So evam paravasham sarvam, everything is under the control of something else, is what's being said here. It's talking in the sense of conditioned origination, pratitya samutpada. Everything is subject to the control of something else, or under the power of something else. And yadvasham, literally which control, or and that under the control of which, sopi, that too is avasha. In other words, not having its, not literally, not own-willed, without its own will. So vasha, if you're avasha, you are without your own control, without able to exercise your own will. You're controlled by something else. So paravasha, other controlled, avasha, without your own control at all. They really have the same meaning, but paravasha explicitly states under the control of something else. Avasha means without control. In other words, without control over what you are doing.
James, is there any connection with the word vassal, or is that just a coincidence?
So vasa,
Vassal, as in a vassal state, or a vassal like a servant, a subject.
that's a good point. I'll check that. It could well be, because a vassal state is very specifically, you are paravasha. You are subject to the control of another. You acknowledge the sovereignty of another. So let me just, I'll check that out, Paladin, and get back on that next time round, or in my next email. Vassal state, vasha. And in fact, even in modern Hindi, you get avashya, means that uncontrollable, which is the modern word in modern Hindi, meaning necessary, something just you inevitably have to do, or something that will necessarily happen. As I think I may have mentioned in the teaching video I did on this, yadvasham, that to which one is under control, sopi chavasha. I I would have felt happier if I'd seen the sopi here, so api, which this is specifically a masculine form. That has slightly puzzled me. Why has he used the masculine? Because he's talking in neuters here, under the control of something else. And that something else is under the control of yet another thing. I would have expected to see tad api, that too, rather than sopi, because that specifically means he too.
Is it just a metrical thing? They just wanted to lose a bit of a syllable.
The way it's put does have the advantage of giving the right number of syllables, and as we see much more in Pali than in Sanskrit, you're allowed to take slight liberties with the meter. But whether Shantideva has departed so far from the canons of classical Sanskrit grammar as to use a neuter instead of a masculine. Okay, well, Paladin, what I can do here is to thank you for handing me on a plate something that can potentially alleviate the puzzlement that I feel. But even so, it's possible, I suppose, that I'd be surprised if a writer like Shantideva had done that. He might have had a bit of a rough afternoon and decided to do it in that way. The meaning is clear anyway. So pi chavasha is sa api cha vasha. And that too is avasha, without its power, or without its own controlling power over itself. So evam paravasham sarvam, that's easy enough. Yadvasham, and that under whose power one is, sopichavasha, that too / he too is powerless, in other words, not able to exercise power over his own acts. The second line is much simpler. Nirmanavadda cheshteshu bhaveshu kvakupyate. Nirmanavat, this is from the root ma, meaning to measure. You just call up iPad here. So the root ma, to measure, you know that one. In Greek it's the me. In Greek it's the me root in Greek, from which we get metron, a measure, from which we have our modern English word meter. The word meter, it just means a measure. So in fact, in Sanskrit, matra and the Greek metron, they both simply mean measure, and they are etymologically the same word. In fact, the word maya, often in more of Hindu philosophy, often translated as illusion, the illusory nature of existence, is in maya, means a measuring out. Something just emanates from Brahma. Measured out was the original meaning.
Sorry, James, sorry, it's Paula here. How did you pass from matra to maya?
It's from the root ma. So it's the root, so it's not met matra to maya, it's the root ma has given us both matra and maya. The ma is present.
Okay.
The ma is present in both. These are just different suffixes on the same root. The suffix tra, which is often an instrument or a way of doing something, shastra, matra, and the maya. Sorry, maya is long. Maya. That's just another way of forming a verbal noun. For example, from the root vid, we get the meaning to know, but the word for knowledge is vidya. So it's just one way of forming a verbal noun from a root. Incidentally, from avidya, that's the standard Buddhist term for ignorance, not non-knowing. It's the one that appears in Pali as avidya. So avidya.
Are you showing the iPad? Are you able to show the iPad, James, please?
Can you see my iPad, everyone? The others,
I can.
you can. Okay, good. So that's the maya vidya. Now this with the prefix nirma literally means to measure something out. And you can either measure out something, a liquid or some substance, as a shopkeeper might. You can. It's also used, for example, in the context of if the ruler is planning a city, he kind of lays out the city. The same nirma is used, and it's used also for what a conjurer does, or somebody who's got a magic show who's producing illusions. It's called he also is nirma. He measures out, and so the nirmana, the original meaning measuring out, also does mean a magic show, and you find it used in the Buddhist literature with this idea of it's all an illusory show. Don't fall for it as ultimately real. And with this suffix vat, used here just to mean like, so magic show like, nirmanavat, outmeasuring like a magic show. In other words, in exactly the same way as with a magic show, qua yate. Qua literally means where, and also by extension it could mean as in a kind of rhetorical question, how could it happen? How could something possibly happen? Qua kupyate, how could one get angry? In other words, it's absurd to get angry at what's just happening in an illusory magic show. So nirmanavat, and we've got a kind of a background noise coming from. Oh, very good. Nirmanavat acheshteshu bhaveshu kwakupyate. Bhava is one of the verbal nouns from the root bhu. Not well-known root bhu, meaning to be. It forms more than one verbal noun. You can have bhava and also bhava. Both forms exist with a partial overlap of meaning. Bhava tends to mean, as I said, there is an overlap. Bhava with a short tends to mean being in the sense of coming into being, coming into existence. Bhava tends to mean a state of existence. So bhava more a dynamic becoming, bhava more a state, and bhava also can mean an existing thing, a being, something which is, something that has come into being.
James, all right, I have heard that from a Hindu from his source that Maya, rather than illusion, is more accurately translated as that which is measured. So instead of saying the creation is an illusion, because it simply doesn't feel that way at times, it's perhaps more accurate to say that it's measured as opposed to being infinite in space and eternal in time. It's measured. And that was
Right.
I found it quite useful, that, because sometimes this notion of it being just an illusory play tends to be a bit difficult, particularly when you're watching nuclear explosions and things like that.
It does. In fact, just plugged my iPad in time, just before the battery ran out and spotted. But so yeah, thanks for that, Chris. The Maya illusion, that's been a word that's been traditionally used in English translations of it, but possibly deriving from a time when we had less general knowledge in the West than exists now. So I'm actually quite pleased to hear you say, it confirms what I was saying, but the Hindu explained it as a measuring. So etymologically, dead on, yes. I mean, there is no doubt that the word Maya just means measuring from the root Ma. You're still muted, Chris.
And hence the laws of physics in Western science can be mathematically very precise, measured.
That all links in, yes. That all links in. I'm pleased you raised that point, Chris. Thanks. Oh. So treat Maya now as that which is measured, and it will coincide with what appears to be I feel a bit shaky. I'm on shaky ground when I'm talking about Hindu things, so I rely on good people like Chris to put me right there. But no, again, I feel on solid ground having that confirmation from a modern Hindu that they do regard it as coming from that root meaning measuring. It falls into place. So
I'm slightly embarrassed to admit that for all these years I've failed to distinguish nirvana from nirvana mentally in my head. I'm glad you've explained it, because in some part of my mind it's never quite separated itself from nirvana, which is terrible.
Well, I'm very pleased you raised that point, Paladin, because it is a rather vital distinction because there's nirvana. There's so many descriptions or pointers, but the idea of that which is ultimately real, whereas nirvana in this context is the exact opposite meaning. The whole point is it's an illusory magic show. So both for Paladin and hopefully now everyone else, that we have got those two very firmly separated. An entirely coincidental, slight, a similar difference of just one letter. But yes, wise to separate them, otherwise we will fall into grave heresy, to quote from my Roman Catholic upbringing. So back to where we were, this Echeshteshu Bhaveshu, this, so Kupyate, here it's the third person singular, get angry, but here it's not a specific person. Here it just, why could one get angry? So it's used in impersonal sense. Literally, where does one get angry? I mean, how could one get angry? How could one reasonably get angry? And what you're angry with will take is it always or usually? Anyway, certainly usually the locative, and here we have the locative plural, angry with motionless beings. So motionless is not quite something that doesn't move. Here it doesn't have its own power of movement. And here we're talking about like puppets or things in a magic show. They can't move by themselves. They're made to move by the conjurer. The So the word cheshta it means something like a movement or a gesture, typically a movement produced by the body. And if you are motionless, you are acheshta. So note here, cheshta as the verbal noun, the making of a gesture, the making of a movement. It's a feminine noun ending in a long a. We are now going to make a negated adjective out of it, motionless, which now becomes an adjective without motion. And note that the long a, which you find in the feminine noun, since this word now has become the second element in a compound adjective, the final long a drops and becomes a short a, and it now declines like any other adjective. So a person is a cheshtaha, masculine singular, and a thing is acheshtam. And acheshteshu bhaveshu, things that do not have their own power of motion. So acheshteshu bhaveshu kvakupyate. How could one get angry at things that do not have their own power of motion, that have no kind of self-control, no ability to decide or control their own acts? So we can do some recitation of that, but before we do, does anyone have any query or doubt about what has been said, apart from, as I say, this little niggling thing that I will make a further attempt to sort out in my mind as why we do have a masculine rather than a neuter there. So you can ask me anything about it apart from that one point. Roger, please.
Well, I probably this is maybe a bit foolish, but Maya, why does measuring out indicate an illusion or illusory nature of existence? What's the connection?
Chris, maybe I can call upon Chris here, who's much better versed. The Mayas, has in the past been translated as illusion, and as you've just mentioned, we know it's from measure. But can you answer Roger that?
It was just a suggestion that it's perhaps better understood as measured. The creation is measured as opposed to being an illusion. Yeah. Particularly for Westerners who tend to think in terms of if something exists, it's got to be measured. And if you can't measure it, it's not. So there are alternative ways of looking at the creation of the world.
Can I say something, James? Because I think it's there in Mahayana Buddhism as well, and it's this idea that you've got the kind of unified totality without any division or separation, and you've got the artificial separating things out into separate beings or entities, something like that. So when you start measuring things out, you're sort of chopping it up into measures rather than the whole, something like that.
Yeah, that kind of coincides with what was in my mind. I can't profess I really know here, but my understanding has been that within Hindu philosophy and Hindu cosmogony, the theories of the origin of the universe. First of all, the word in the standard Hindu word for creation is srishti. Oops, I picked up the wrong thing. So from the root srij, the basic meaning of the root srij is just to emit something, to send forth from oneself. And it makes a verbal noun, srishti. So when you hear a Hindu just talking about srishti, it's the emanating forth. So remember, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, you get God creating the universe. The personal God creating something else that is not God. In Hindu philosophy, and this is just very crudely and broadly put, all that we see as the known universe is an emanation from Brahma, from the sleep of Brahma, and from the waking of Brahma. I'm keeping a close eye on the motions of Chris's head here. I'm pleased to see that you're nodding, Chris. You're kind of in agreement of what I say there. So, in other words, it's not Judeo-Christian God creating something. It's the universe is an emanation, something that emerges from the being of Brahma. So that's the Srishti.
Could I say that there's also the idea of psychological projection, that the apparent external universe is a projection from image within mind, and therefore measured outwards. We perceive an external universe of objects arranged in space that are projected out psychologically from what is essentially, from a physical point of view, a flat image on our retina. So the world as we perceive it is in fact measured as a projection outwards. Perhaps that's relevant.
Well, in the light of what you said, Barry, I think that any further words from me would be superfluous. I mean, I think I for one can remain very happy with what Chris and Barry have both said. And I think Barry is, from the psychological point of view, put it very, it's kind of measured out. It's an outpouring, an outmeasuring of the mind, just as the universe, the known universe, is in Hindu cosmogony an outpouring or an outmeasuring from the being of Brahma. So, as above, so below. We do the same thing with our own brains. We receive impressions, and we, as it were, mentally create the external world as a kind of invention of our minds from the impressions that we have received.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that I'm seeing all of you on my screen, but what's really happened? Certain photons of light are striking my eyes, and I'm interpreting it in a certain way, and I'm reassured to note that there are certain predictable results of what's happening, but the fact the results are predictable doesn't alter the underlying fact that it's just a creation in my own brain of sense impressions that are being received via the physical senses.
It's a sort of shared dream, perhaps, James, a shared dream of which we're each a sort of point of view. So each of us creates our external world, but there's a consistency between our individual experiences of that together we describe as a real external universe. So
Yes.
Yeah.
A reality by consensus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Reality by consensus, like a sort of mosaic of individual projected worlds. But of course, it can't be us individually creating that. I mean, we are created by whatever is creating the universe as a whole. So it consists, I suppose, from looking at a sort of Christian context, it's the mind of God. The mind of God is creating the universe, and each of us is a point of view within that mind. Something like that.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Go back to the word in the text, James. So the Nirmanakaya, this is why I really should have sorted this out in my own mind long ago, but the Nirmanakaya is the world in which the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas project themselves into a form in which we can perceive them with our limited vision. So they're dwelling in the Dharmakaya. They're dwelling in the Dharmakaya, the ultimate, but they have to put themselves into a form in which we're able to perceive them with our limited view of the world, and that's the Nirmanakaya.
The Nirmana. I'd forgotten that one. Dead on, Paladin. Yes, the Nirmana is that same word to use as the magic shows. They are producing an illusory. Illusory is kind of the wrong word. It's got its own reality there, but they have measured out. They have produced out of their own minds. They have literally measured out in a way that other people in ordinary unenlightened minds can perceive them as a physically perceived thing.
And
Yeah,
then
thanks, Ben. I hadn't spotted
and then
that.
the Sambhogakaya, which I never quite understand, but I think it's the enjoyment body. It's the slightly rarefied version of that, where they can perceive each other, but we can't perceive them.
Ah, yeah, I've been puzzled by that as well. The Sambhoga literally just means enjoyment. It's kind of an ordinary word of the language.
I think it's just a lovelier form in which only Buddhas and Bodhisattvas can perceive each other, but we can't see them without.
Right.
It's interesting, James. There's also central to Advaita Vedanta, esoteric Hindu philosophy, is this notion of restraint, yama, or measured action.
So, excuse me one moment. I have to explain to people now when I'm looking at my telephone. I'm not rudely checking messages. I'm adjusting my hearing aids. I've got to adjust them up. 1 second. Okay, sorry, I've readjusted them. Please carry on, Chris.
Yeah, I think it's very pertinent to this particular verse is the Hindu notion of yama, or restraint, measured responses to certainly to provocation. So that I think all this tends to hang together. It's a question of measuring out its proportionality. If an action is mismeasured, it's disproportional to the provocation, and it usually results in all sorts of unpleasant consequences.
Right, so I hadn't looked at the association there. So the yama actually, does mean restraint in the sense of exercising a power to hold in something like a burst of anger.
Yes,
the restraint. There would be a sanyama of that anger.
Yes.
Yeah,
and acting in a proportionate or a measured fashion to whatever situation one might be faced with. As opposed to completely losing it and acting from a standpoint of fury.
Now, it's very interesting you say acting in a measured fashion. And that has its reflection in Sanskrit and Pali as well, acting in a measured fashion. Let me just give you the... So I've just told you about the matra, meaning a measure, etymologically the same as our word via Greek, meter. If you are matradnya, you are measure knowing. In other words, and it's often used, in fact, in Pali, it's much more commonly used in Pali, matanyu. So the nya becomes a new in Pali. So it's the same word. Matradnya matanyu means measure knower, one who acts according to good measure. And it's frequently used in, for example, you see it where somebody is in a position of authority and has to administer punishment. He doesn't go overboard with violent punishment. It's administered wisely, proportionately to what he seeks to that is exactly knowing the measure, the measure of your own act, what the correct measure is. So this word measure, coming back to Roger's initial question, and this word measure, I'm glad you raised that. So see what a rabbit hole you have dug here, Roger. So it's become it's wonderful. It's what we're here for. So this see now that this word measure, I mean, the English word measure, is etymologically the same.
It's actually quite astonishing what you can get just from looking in detail at one word like that, isn't it?
Exactly so.
It's quite astonishing.
And it's just a happy circumstance. This root ma exists in Greek and has come into English. And it all has that kind of the idea of not measuring, how long or how heavy something is, but the idea now of something being emanating, the idea of emanating from yourself. or from the mind of Brahma, as the case may be. So I hope that this has set your mind, either set your mind racing or set your mind at rest, Roger, about the initial question.
I think it's prompted me to look into it a bit more.
Yeah.
Can I just ask if I've got the right understanding here?
Yes, please, Paula.
So are we saying that Maya etymologically is a measuring?
That is correct. Just very simply, Maya means a measuring, and how it's then interpreted, of course, is very wide.
So that's what I wanted to just to a measuring. That measuring resembles a reality, so a measured reality, but that reality is in fact an illusion, according to the philosophic text, etc., and that's how Maya has come to mean illusion. Is that sort of what people are trying to say here?
That is kind of what people are saying, but subject to one caution. That, for example, we have in Buddhism the doctrine of, in Pali it's called anatta, in Sanskrit anatman, the doctrine of not non-self. So it's not saying there's no such thing as a self, and we all have our own experienced reality. We all experience such a thing as oneself. What it is saying is, when you examine it further and further and further, you can't find anything that you could say, that is a self. So in other words, what we consider to be myself is, on examination, not quite what you initially thought it to be. You examine it more and more, and it kind of evaporates somewhat. So not exactly an illusion to something that doesn't exist as fake, but something that does not have the attributes that we give to it. Look at it more and more closely, and what is there? And then you get into that state, and then two seconds later, some idiot says something very stupid to you, and you feel yourself bubbling up again. But hopefully, having been through the exercise once, you can. So it's the contrast between it's a sammuta dhamma and paramatta, sammuta atta and paramatta, the conventional reality, as we were just the kind of thing we all agree on certain things. We all manage to talk to each other using the English language and using this wonderful Zoom invention, this all conventional reality acting in a predictable way. That is the sammuta, conventional reality. And there's the paramatta, the ultimate meaning, which we have to get on with our Buddhist practice, or whatever the practice may be, to see. And this, it's this Maya, this measuring out, is what in kind of older ideas has created the thinking something is what it's not. So there's the element of the magic show. And what the conjurer produces is real in the sense that you can see it, you can take a photograph of it, but you're deceived as to what the ultimate nature of it is. You're tricked, as a conjurer tricks you into thinking something is what it isn't. I do love these rabbit holes. Has that satisfied you, at least partially, Paola?
Completely, thank you.
I'm very pleased to hear that. So, any more queries, and we could have a bit of recitation of this verse. Anyway, queries as we go along if they arise in your mind. So I'll just read it through once more. Evam paravasham.
Can we have it back on the screen, please?
Of course, yeah. All right, Matt. Thank you. Oops. Let me enlarge it a bit as well. Evam paravasham sarvam yadvasham sopi chavashah nirmanavaddacheshteshu bhaveshu prakupyate. By the way, this, sorry, yes, Chris, was it?
Yeah, James, sorry. This is something which I confused me a bit this morning when I was looking at your uploaded version of this. With Yad Vasham, in the lowest box that you have before you do the analysis, the ma, yeah, just if you can go up a bit, please.
Yes, yeah.
A bit further, please. It's just that in the, I think this is just a typo. The Vasham in that box is not Anuswara before the so happy. The ma, the m, just
okay, so we've got the
it should be Anuswara, should it?
That was deliberate, because what I've done here, Chris, we've got the Devanagari box, which is how it's written in regular Devanagari. We then have the second box, which exactly reflects how it's written in the Devanagari. For example, because it's written in the Devanagari script, all as one word. That's just a spelling convention, really. That's why I've written it all as one word there. The next box down, I do reflect the Devanagari, but do word divisions by way of assistance to the to the students. And then down here, I do what's known as Sandhi Vigraha. In other words, I do not apply, I write the words as they appear on their own without applying Sandhi. So that I've written this without Sandhi there, because if that word in Devanagari were written on its own in isolation, it would end in a pure M, consonantal M.
Right.
So that is deliberate.
Mm.
In fact, I had to go through certain keystrokes to make it so, because what I do the first one when I'm typing out, when I'm preparing the document. In goes I do this one, and then I copy and paste into the second box and do the word divisions. Then I copy and paste into the third box the divisions, and also take out. In fact, what I should have done, and me being pompous about being deliberate, what I should have done is done that could have thrown me. I confess that by being inconsistent in my Sandhi Vigraha, in other words, removal of the Sandhi.
Yeah. I think what's happening, James, is that you're putting things up and then making corrections, because in your version that you've uploaded, you haven't applied Santi to in the line directly below the Devanagari. You haven't applied Santi to the mud before the soapy. So you've obviously corrected for this particular version.
Is this one that you haven't? Sometimes when I call something up and I see, oh, that's a mistake, and I correct it. And I'm afraid it does happen with my forgetfulness that the corrected version will simply sit there in my own computer without being shared. That's a simple forgetfulness on my part. I'll make sure that this.
Well, there's so much work that you're putting in. These little things are bound to creeping up there.
That's a very kind interpretation. Thank you, Chris. Known as I think in early printing presses, the printer's devil. Because however careful, in the old-fashioned manual typeset, however careful you were, there was always a little imp, a little devil in the printing shop, which would make sure nothing was ever quite perfect. There'd always be some error, would creep in. So
Yeah, it's an extraordinary business, isn't it? I sent an email last night, which I reread several times, and I was sure was grammatically correct in every respect. I looked at it again this morning, and then I'd missed out the crucial word time. When I read it previously, my check-in reads, I somehow saw time in my email, in the written email which I sent to a client. But this morning I looked at it yet again and realised that the word was missing. But somehow or other, when the mind scans the text, it just, as it were, inserts it.
Well, I'm glad I'm not alone in that experience, Chris, because I always fear to read again in the morning emails I've sent the previous day, because you're bound to find there. By the way, did you proofread it on screen or in hard copy?
On screen.
Proofreading on screen. If something really has to be very carefully proofed, I've just given up proofreading on screen. It's just so error prone. There's something about ink on paper that hits the eye much more than a screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I were writing a sort of formal business letter, I wouldn't dream of sending it out just having done a screen proofread. Like on paper, with a little ruler that I held over it, and line by line.
Yeah, I remember that.
So anyway, thank you for pointing out these things, and I say well done for noticing it. You may congratulate yourself for noticing these things. Just like the more kindly meditation teachers, who they tell you when your mind has drifted off onto some fantasy or another, and if you say, well, when did you notice it? I noticed it at the end of the session. That's not terribly good, but then somebody says, well, might notice my mind drifted off 30 or 40 times. And I says, well, congratulations, at least you spotted it 30 or 40 times. So you get kind of shorter and shorter intervals between spotting it is a sign of very good progress there. So rejoice that you've actually drifted off 40 times, because it means you've noticed it and brought yourself back for 40 times. So anyway, Chris, now that all of the minutiae of this verse are well established in your mind, would you like to lead off with a recitation of it?
I've asked for this, haven't I? Right, here we go.
It's treat it as a reward, Chris.
Ewang parawasang sawanang yadvasang sopi javashaha.
Does it javashaha? Javashaha. That's good, javashaha.
Nirmanam vad achestesu bhavdesu qua kupayate.
Remember, kupyate.
Oh, kupyate.
Kupyate. It's just a pya there. Now remember here the what is it? A cheshte is that with the subdots. It's a shta.
Oh yeah.
Shta. This, by the way, this phenomenon of the shta. I'll just call up the iPad again. You get the shta arising from various different phenomena. Sometimes it's original, sometimes it's not, and I'll explain what I mean. We have the word raja, we all know means a king, cognate with the Latin word rex and regal, raja. And if you want to make the word kingdom, you add tra to the end of it, just as matra, shastra, yantra, tantra. A rashtra is a kingdom. So what happens is you get, the root is raj plus tra. Now you have external sandhi and internal sandhi. Internal sandhi is what the difference in sounds where, for example, typically you add an ending to a root or a suffix to a root or something like that. So by word internal sandhi, a j before a ta, you can't have a j before a ta. even within a word in Sanskrit. Sometimes a j becomes a k, and sometimes before a t it becomes a sh. So that's why you get rashtra. Rashtra means a kingdom. It's the where a raja rules. Incidentally, the Maharashtra, the state in India, of which the capital is Bombay, just means the great kingdom. Maharashtra. You also get the root drish, meaning to see. And we make the verbal noun just by adding T to it. One of the ways of making the verbal noun is by adding T. Now, it's a rule of internal sandhi that wherever you get a sh, that's the palatal sh, followed by a t, they always merge together to form subdotted, that's retroflex shta. So that's how you get drishti. Drishti is drishti. That's an invariable rule in Sanskrit. You can't have a sh followed by a t, or palatal sh has been shta. And you said drishti, by the way, it turns up in Pali as ditti, as in samaditi, commonly translated as right view. So you find this shta cluster very frequently occurs in Sanskrit. It almost invariably turns up as a t in Pali. For example, the Sanskrit word rashtra becomes actually ratta in Pali. Rashtra, Sanskrit, ratta in Pali. So can you pronounce it cheshta, Chris? Cheshta.
Cheshta.
Cheshta. And that's the one with the tongue slightly curled back onto the hard palate that produces this sound, da, da, that we typically associate with people who've learned English in India, where they hear our t as a t. So it's that same sound. But whereas we're used to hearing the t and the d, the same can happen to the sh sound. So you can have a sh pronounced where near the front where a j would come out, with the tongue curled back, and that's what we have. Cheshta. Mm. For the Pali learners among you, of course, remember that the sh and the sh sounds don't exist in Pali. It generally becomes a s sound in Pali. Okay, thank you, Chris. So we can come on to Dilly. Would you like to give us a recitation of that verse? Let me call up.
Yeah. Evam paravasham sarvam yadvasham sopi chavashah nirmanavadacheshteshu bhaveshu pakupyate.
Lovely, thank you, Dilly. That was beautiful. Wish I could chant like that. So, Madeleine, we're round to you, please.
Yes. Evam paravasham sarvam yadvasham sopi chavashaha nirmanavada chisteshu bhaveshu qua kupyate.
Very good, lovely. Now, you may be asking about the pronunciation of the anuswara here. Here we've got anuswara, evam, before a p, and there's no doubt or dispute about that. It's going to be pronounced as a m, evam paravasham, evam paravasham. It will. Now, what happens to the anuswara before a s? There is no complete agreement, even among the Brahmins who chant Sanskrit. Some of them will just pronounce it as a pure nasal. In the same way, for example, that in French you have a pure nasal, en France, the en sound. So some Brahmins might say Paravashan, Paravashan Sarvam, Paravashan Sarvam. Others will pronounce it as a n, Paravashan Sarvam. Yet others will pronounce it as a n on the grounds that the s is a dental, and so they pronounce Paravashan Sarvam. So you will hear all three. And as to which is right, that's a matter of tradition and style. It's impossible to say at this length of time which is right. And honestly, it doesn't matter. You'll hear perfectly respectable chanting with different varieties of anuswara. Don't fret about it if you hear different people pronouncing it in different ways. Even within India, they would be regarded as legitimate differences. I mean, I remember years and years ago, I was trying to get a Scotsman to say world. And, you know, I tried and I don't know whether he was winding me up, but he just went, world. I said, no, world, yeah, world. So, so legitimate differences within the same languages. Okay, thank you very much, Madeline. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shri Animala, we're round to you.
Yes. Evam paravasam sarvam yadvasam sopi chavasah nirmanavada chetoishu bhaveshu kvakupyate.
Yeah, it's very good that our two native Sinhala speakers have both chanted it in a very similar way. Tell me, Shri Nimala, were you consciously adopting any particular tradition of chanting, any particular rhythm or melody as you chanted that?
Normal, when we say our prayers, we have very chanting, but this one I just took the same way like that.
Okay, was that the same as your chanting in Pali, do you mean?
Yes, yeah. Like
okay,
this.
fine. So actually, it really, and were you doing the same, Dilly? So you're still muted, Dilly?
I'm learning also how to.
Okay, right.
I'm learning Sanskrit here also.
Right, because actually, I think we'll come round now to Kath next for the contrast there. But it does work. So we have these particular ways of chanting in Pali. And again, they vary from Theravada, one Theravada country to another. We have the particularly Sri Lankan ways of doing it, and we have particularly Thai ways of doing it. But the way you were both applying it to a Sanskrit chant, I really enjoyed that. So, Kath, are you available to give us
my iPad is about to cut out. I can't get it to charge at the moment. So if I disappear, that's what's happened.
Let's hope you get your gem of a chant out before
the next
your
few
battery
seconds.
fails.
Yeah.
Off we go.
Evam paravasham sarvam yadvasham sopi chavashaha nirmanavada cheshteshu bhaveshu kvakupyate.
Okay, thank you very much, Kath. Yeah, it's wonderful. We have this contrast now between the chanting that you've learnt from Indian Brahmanical sources and the same given by Sri Nimala and Dilly, modelled on Sri Lankan Theravada chanting. It actually it comes out beautifully. Thank you. So, Roger, can we come round to you?
Just before I start, the fourth box down, should Evam lose its anuswara as well? In the fourth box, the one without Sandy.
Yeah, it should. I just didn't do this. Yeah, more attention is required. Attention, boy. I should have done it throughout, actually.
Okay. Okay, I won't be chanting. I'll have a go at this. Evam paravashan sarvam yadavashan sopi chavashaha nirmana vada teshu bhaveshu qua kupyate.
Right, can you just say again, acheshteshu, acheshteshu?
Acheshteshu.
Okay, yes, as far as I could hear, of course the sound never comes out perfectly over the airwaves, but as far as I could tell, you were very correctly, putting the tip of the tongue slightly back in the mouth to produce the retroflex means, bent back, the retroflex sound. So say once more, acheshteshu.
Acheshteshu.
Very good. That came out pretty perfectly there. Okay, thank you, Roger.
Thank you.
We're now round to Barry, please.
Yeah. Evam paravasham sarvam yadvasham supi chavashaha nirmana vada sheshteshu bhaveshu kva kupyate.
Okay, pretty nice. Can you just do the last word or last compound word of the first line, the chavashaha?
Chavashaha.
Okay, very good. Chavashaha.
Chavashaha.
Okay, that was perfect. Yeah, thank you, Barry.
Thank you.
And we can wind up then with Palden, please.
Evam paravasham sarvam yadvasham sopi chavashaha nirmanavad acheshteshu bhaveshu kvakupyate.
Okay, can you let that last line just come out with fluency? Nirmana vadacheshteshu bhaveshu kvakupyate.
Nirmana vadacheshteshu bhaveshu kvakupyate.
Very good. That came out beautifully. Thank you, Palden. So we'll wind up in a moment. After I do have to shoot off fairly promptly at 3. Are there any more comments or queries? And unless Paola, you feel like doing a recitation for us, do you? Can you hear us, Paola? Oh, maybe the sound isn't coming. Oh, no, it's not. Okay, not to worry then. Sound wasn't coming through from Paola. So, any comments or queries? Please.
That was a fun session, James.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, I mean, I certainly enjoyed it very much. It still often happens to me as the time comes round, and I think, my God, no, not really. I think, do I have to do this? Do I have to do this? And why am I doing this? And at the end of the session, I always think, I know why I've done it. I'm looking forward to the next one. So thank you all very much for joining me. And we'll see you again in a fortnight's time. And don't look for the message from the Buddhist Society. It might or might not come. I'll just take responsibility for my own messages and the posting of the recordings and get them to you.
James.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, James.
Thanks, James.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you to all.
Bye,
Goodbye
everyone.
then. Goodbye. Thank you. Bye. Bye.